We will review the votes, but it looks like everybody voted yes. So I now turn the program over to Angela DeMondren, who will discuss the upcoming proposed constitutional amendments. Angela is a past president of our league, serves on the Jacksonville Resiliency Committee, and is regional field director at Solar United Neighbors. Angela?
All right, thank you for having me. I'm excited. I do this every couple of years, every time we have these amendments, and so I am happy to say there's only 6 this election cycle as opposed to years past, but they can still be very confusing. So let me see if I can share my screen, and we'll kick this off. We have 6 state ballot initiatives, ballot amendments that will be facing voters, and 2 local referendums that I will go over. Let's see. Okay. Can you all see my screen? Or I guess someone give me a thumbs up. All right, I think all is going well. All right, so our Decision 2020 is upon us. If you receive your ballot by mail, like myself, you've received, I don't know if you can see me, but I have my ballot that came in the mail, and it's 2 pages, back and front. And our main objective, I would say, really, certainly locally and statewide, the league is to help you make informed decisions and certainly vote down the ballot, not just focus solely on who's running for president or local races or state races, but also the amendments. So we're going to particularly hone in on the constitutional amendments and what you need to know about all 6 that's on your ballot. But first, many of you, I see your names, many of you are longtime supporters of the league, but for others that are guests, who is the League of Women Voters? We were established in 1920 when women got the right to vote, won the right to vote. Men are accepted since 1974, and about 20% of our membership is men, by the way. We research, educate, and advocate for issues. We are nonpartisan. We do not endorse or oppose individual candidates, but we do take issues up, and through thorough study, you'll see a number of the amendments. You'll be able to see what we are supporting and what we're opposing, as well as some other groups, again, to help you make an informed decision. And I also want to share, our establishment in 1920 was taking up our very first issue of ratification of the 19th Amendment. So kind of a neat factoid there. And we, like I said, we don't support or oppose individual candidates. So Florida elections. Floridians vote every 2 years, and every 2 years we see ballot initiatives. I mentioned earlier, we only have 6 of the state, but if you recall, a couple years back, we've had 11 plus in front of voters. And so we, just like every couple of years, and well, every year, the local and state leagues are helping local members and just everyone in general to certainly make an informed decision. Florida has term limits, governor and state legislature, and by the way, our legislature meets for only 60 days. You'll see some amendments that I'll highlight. It'll be listed that were put forth by the legislature on this last session, and some that were citizen initiatives. Florida's Constitution. By the way, all these amendments will be placed and enshrined into Florida's Constitution. Our Constitution establishes rules and basic rights, and it Floridians, the vote, requires 60% of the vote required to pass the actual amendment. All right, so let's dive right in. Amendment 1 is a citizen requirement to vote in Florida elections. This was originated by citizens. It was a citizen initiative, the sponsor being Florida Citizen Voters. And to take a step back, what I mean by a citizen initiative is that Enough signatures were collected. In Florida, it can be upwards of 800,000-900,000. Many organizations strive for 1 million signatures, and then is approved by the Florida Supreme Court. They approve the language, whether it's 75 words or less and clear and concise before it goes in front of voters, which is what's on your ballot. So this is that's kind of a general overview. So Amendment 1, the first one on your ballot, is to replace the phrase every citizen of the United States with only a citizen of the United States. Not much of a difference. It sounds kind of confusing, but that's simply, it's just kind of a changing of the phrase or the word. No functional or financial impact on elections because, as we all know, U.S. citizenship is a current requirement in the Constitution. All right, and I'll go over what a vote yes would mean and a vote no, but I also want to add that the reasoning for this initiative is unclear because a passage would make no real change to Florida's Constitution, which already limits voting to U.S. citizens. Supporters say they want to ensure that elections are preserved for committed citizens of the United States, and that non-citizens are prevented from voting now and in the future. Critics say there are few instances where non-citizens are purposely on the voter rolls and voting, citing a 2012 investigation of 180 names of the 13 million registered voters in Florida by the Secretary of State and county election officials. The investigation uncovered only 85 names on the list were not truly eligible to vote. So a vote yes would mean you're replacing that word. A vote no, you'd keep the current constitutional language. Every citizen of the U.S. can vote in Florida. And we'll list what a yes and no vote means, but also supporting and opposing. Supporting is Florida Citizen Voters. They're the sponsor of this amendment. Opposing organizations, the League of Women Voters of Florida. All right, moving on to Amendment 2. And I can't really see you all, so if there are any questions, you'll have to flag them for me, but otherwise I'm just going to keep moving forward and certainly ask for questions at the end because we do have quite a few to go through. Amendment 2, raising Florida's minimum wage. This was also a citizen initiative. Sponsor was Florida for a Fair Wage. Raising the minimum wage to $10 an hour effective September 30th, 2021. And then our current minimum wage is $8.56 an hour. This is, and then it slowly steps up, and then starting September 30th, 2022, the minimum wage will go up annually until it reaches $15 an hour on September 30th, 2026. Future minimum wage adjusted annually for inflation starting 2027. Let's see, a few more notes. Today's some large companies have increased starting wages, including McDonald's. I think they recently made news recently, as well as Target, Walt Disney, Amazon, and Costco. They've already just raised everyone's wage to $15 an hour. Today's low wage workers earn less per hour than their counterparts did 50 years ago, despite the fact that the economy has grown dramatically over the past 50 years. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the National Employment Law Project, minimum wage workers tend to be 25 and under, female, and people of color. And also another note, the Florida Division of Elections estimates a higher minimum wage for government workers would cost state and local governments $16 million during the first year of implementation, and for $540 million in 2027 when the last raise takes effect. So a vote yes, would you be in favor of allow minimum wage workers in Florida to earn enough to afford those basic necessities and raise it incrementally up to $15 an hour? A vote no, would you maintain the current minimum wage at $8.56 an hour, keeping labor cost at current levels? There are a number of supporting organizations also opposing. So supporting the AFL-CIO, Florida for a Fair Wage, Organized Florida, and the League of Women Voters of Florida. Opposing is the Florida Chamber of Commerce, not surprisingly, Business Interest, Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. And I also did want to note too, we're not going to delve too much into why you can clearly see what the league is supporting and opposing on these slides. I won't go into that, but we can share our state resources in a website that goes into a little more depth in the process of how they came to make that decision. This is just an educational presentation. Okay, moving on to Amendment 3. Let's see. So all voters vote in primary elections for state legislature, governor, and cabinet. This is just state elections. So this was another citizen initiative. The sponsor was All Voters Vote, and I believe they collected nearly 1 million signatures for this one. The amendment proposes to replace Florida's closed primary partisan elections for governor, lieutenant governor, state cabinet, and the legislature with a single primary in which all voters vote regardless of party affiliation, and all candidates would run on a single nonpartisan primary ballot regardless of their party affiliation. The top 2 vote getters would go on to the general election, and this change would take effect January 1st of 2024. Currently, Florida has closed primaries, and a voter must be registered with a party to vote in a party primary election. The winner of the partisan primary election advances to the general election. But I do want to also define currently no party affiliated voters in Florida still can vote. Because there's always judicial races or any kind of local race. They just currently cannot vote in whether it's the Democratic primary race or the Republican primary race. But it is, and I do want to push back against this myth that they can't vote or they don't have any option to vote for anything, because that's not necessarily true. So beginning in 2024, if Amendment 3 passes, state race primary would become a top 2 primary in which the 2 top vote getters would advance to the general election. Again, this would apply only to state races. Amendment language does not require that a candidate's party affiliation be shown next to their name on their ballot. Not doing so could lead to voter confusion. Such a requirement would have to come from the legislature. And if only 2 candidates qualify, the primary would be canceled, and those 2 candidates would advance to the general election. This could result in 2 candidates of the same political party running against one another in the same race. The top 2 primary is also referred to as a jungle or blanket primary. A vote yes, you would establish this open primary system, and a vote no would keep the current system of closed primaries held by each political party. Supporting organizations, All Voters Vote, they sponsored it, and Florida Fair and Open Primaries. Opposing organizations, not surprisingly, the 2 political parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, as well as, you can see them here, a number of other organizations, Florida Chamber of Commerce, yes, the League of Women Voters of Florida, Organized Florida, a number of organizations are opposing this.
Angela, there's a couple of comments on the first 3 amendments and a question if you want to pause and take those now.
Sure.
So are you able to see in the chat, or would you like me to restate?
Let me see.
We've got a comment on 1 and a question on number 2.
Yeah, I can't see the questions. You'll have
Sure.
to.
So with Amendment 1, there's a comment that Amendment 1 removes the word every, so that in the future only citizens can vote, but some citizens could be excluded. Could that be the real reason for proposing the amendment?
I'm not sure why this was the reasoning behind it. I mentioned some stats on a past study, but I'm really not sure why the language and the wordsmithing would change, or ultimately what the background is.
Thank you. And then on Amendment 2, the question is, why isn't it a law? Or I guess they mean, why isn't it moving through the legislature rather than being an amendment?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a question we hear when we do see a number of amendments. And why can't the legislature pass some of these things? And I would add, instead of enshrining into our Constitution. That's a great question. And I think I can personally say, not necessarily a league position, that I think the legislature should be making some of these changes. Many of them are in their power to do so. Instead of some amendments we'll see that are really kind of hamstringing our local, say, property appraisers on different things that can simply be changed. The legislature can make these changes instead of making them enshrined in our Constitution, which down the road we find is not helpful, or prohibiting our local governments from making their own changes for their own citizenry and what makes sense for them. And then trying to pull these things out of the Constitution to make those changes is a huge, huge effort.
Thank you. That's all the questions and comments for now.
Great. Okay. Amendment 4. Let's see, that's where we are. Amendment 4 now, let's see. Voter approval of constitutional amendments. This is an interesting one. As we know from past years, we see many amendments, many of them coming from citizen initiatives, and I would even take that a step further, and many of these coming from our citizens because they have lobbied their local elected officials or just our Tallahassee representatives in general and have gotten nowhere. And so a citizen initiative is really gathering signatures from other Floridians on a specific issue and then putting that forth. And then there's already a hurdle between the amount of signatures, crafting the language to make sure it's clear and concise, getting approval by the Florida Supreme Court, and so on. And then here we are, it's on our ballot. And then Floridians, 60% actually have to approve this. So those are just the steps that we currently have to take. And there's more, I'm just trying to simplify them, but those are already high bars to reach. This Amendment 4, requires all proposed changes, amendments to the Florida Constitution to be approved by voters in 2 elections instead of 1 in order to take effect. This applies the current 60% voter approval for passage requirement to both elections, meaning it's going to be on your ballot twice, and twice you have to reach that 60% threshold. And greatly increases the difficulty for voters to amend Florida Constitution via direct democracy. This is the current versus proposed process. So I mentioned this earlier. Current process is a citizen initiative qualifies for the ballot, is referred to the ballot via the legislature or commissions. The amendment is rejected or approved. The amendment is then added to the Constitution. And I'll even take it a step further. Our current process is the legislature may tweak or has to implement this. And so that's an additional step that could delay. Currently that delays, and we've seen this with a couple past amendments where it's continually fought in court or, what have you. So this is actually proposing to add on to those steps. So you collect the amount of signatures. Your amendment, say it moves forward by 60% of voters, then the amendment is placed on the next statewide election ballot for voter approval or rejection. And then so it just is essentially going through the same process twice. That's what Amendment 4 is proposing. A vote yes, you go through this process twice. A vote no would maintain the current requirement of the 60% voter approval in 1 election for the passage of constitutional amendments. Supporting organizations. Keep Our Constitution Clean is the sponsor, Florida Chamber of Commerce, and then a number of opposing organizations. Many of which I'll note that the opposing organizations are many that we recognize that have actually had volunteers on the ground and collected signatures every couple of years that have found it very difficult to get things moving in Tallahassee. Thus, this is their way of getting passage, or at least getting the voters to decide. So that is Amendment 4. Amendment 5, limitation on homestead exemption. This was brought forth by the legislature. Extends the period for transferring Save Our Homes benefits from 2 to 3 years, effective January 1st, 2021. And this addresses reduced Save Our Homes portability window resulting of late year home sales. This could reduce property tax revenues available for school and non-school services and limits local government control over budgets, preempting home rule. This is what I kind of alluded to earlier. Sometimes these type of amendments could be better served in the legislature or even at the local level. Enshrining in the Constitution may prohibit, reduces property tax revenue. Maybe it's fine today, maybe a handful of years down the road, kind of hamstrings our local government from making those changes. A vote yes would extend the period to transfer Save Our Homes benefit from 2 years to 3 years, and a vote no would retain the current 2-year period to transfer our Save Our Homes benefit. Supporting organizations, the Florida legislature, they originated this and put this on the ballot for us to make this decision. Opposing organizations, the League of Women Voters of Florida. Okay, moving forward. Amendment 6, ad valorem tax discount for spouses of certain deceased veterans who had permanent combat-related disabilities. This would allow existing homestead property tax discount transfer to surviving spouses of a deceased permanently combat-injured veteran. Benefit effective until the spouse remarries, sells, or disposes of the property. Reduces property tax revenue available for school and non-school services, and could limit local government control over their budgets. A vote yes would extend the homestead property tax discount to surviving spouses of deceased combat injured veterans. A vote no would not extend it, not extend current homestead property tax discount to surviving spouses of deceased combat injured veterans. So I'll also add a couple of notes on this one. A vote no would continue the policy, not impact local level of property tax revenue, leave property tax at law out of the Florida Constitution, and preserve our local government's control. Preservability of local governments to efficiently respond to current and future community needs. Supporting the Florida legislature, unopposed the League of Women Voters of Florida. And I'll just keep moving along. So we do have a couple local ballot referendums. And what distinguishes these from the state amendments, the state amendments require 60% to pass. Local referendums that you'll see, like we have a school district of Duval County surtax referendum that will be coming in front of us. That is a simple majority to pass, as well as a one with regard to JA and their board appointment process. So what is this school district of Duval County tax referendum? We've seen a lot of commercials. We see a lot of, I personally have seen a ton of yard signs. There's a lot of organization. This, I think, it largely is seen as a bipartisan move to really get our schools in better shape. Some of our schools are over 100 years old. So what this would do to upgrade aging schools through repairs and modernization, to keep schools safe, and to continue to promote a conducive learning environment, to improve technology, replace existing old new schools. I think I even saw on the school board has actually put out a very detailed plan highlighting individual schools, what the repairs that are needed. And I believe I saw somewhere where they have actually noted over 400 portables that they would replace or do away with, because they now have funding to repair the needed buildings that they already have. So the school board would be authorized to levy a 15-year half-cent sales surtaxed with expenditures based upon the capital outline plan and monitored by an independent citizens committee. I think there's still maybe some questions on what the citizens committee, who they are and what they're going to do, but this is essentially a half-cent sales tax to make those needed improvements. So a yes vote, you're voting in favor of the half-penny sales tax that takes effect January 1st, 2021. And a no, you would essentially say no to the school board, and they'll have to find another way to move this forward. And I think they've listed a number of hurdles, or that's just not a reality, whether it's at the state level, reducing their funding and the like. So that's our school board referendum.
Angela, on the school board, do we know how much of those funds would go to charter schools?
We do not. They are included, but I did not see a list of the specific charter schools. I did see a list of like the local based on the districts, and that may have been included, but I don't know if they've actually carved out a specific percentage that will go to charter schools. Great. But it will be a part of overall package. If there's a need, then that certainly if the charter school needs a new roof, it's not going to be put on hold. I think everything is going to be in line based on most likely the length of how long a school or a project has been waiting. Or for example, if the air conditioning is not working, that would be prioritized.
Thank you.
Okay, JA referendum. This is one that kind of came forward, I believe, from our council member, Garrett Dennis. And really if we all follow the news carefully, and we've seen the reporting by the local Florida Times Union on the privatization effort by JA executives. They have since either left or been asked to resign or removed. And I'm talking about the executive level as well as the board. And this really kind of came from looking and identifying the appointment process of the JA board. The JA board then hires the CEO, to which hires the executive team and the like. And so this is really identifying the current structure, which is right now the mayor identifies someone that he or she feels would be great for the JA board. The city council confirms that or approves that, and then they become a member of the JA board. This referendum would take some of those seats and put those in the hands of the city council president. They would have, it's either 3 or 4 different seats that they would appoint, and the city council would approve moving forward instead of it all being in the mayor's hands. So a yes vote supports amending the city charter to do the following. That would authorize the city council to appoint 4 of the 7 members of the Jackson Electric Authority board, with the mayor appointing and the city council confirming the other 3, and require 1 city council appointed to be either a former JA employee or be recommended by a JA employee or group of employees. In effect, February 2021. A no vote would keep it as is, essentially. Oppose the measure to amend the city charter with the mayor appointing and the city council confirming all appointees, basically the way it is today. And that is our amendments and our local referendums. Again, 60% passage for the state ballot amendments, and simple majority for our local referendums for this the school half-penny sales tax and the JA board appointment process. So some important dates. I think this October 5th is a little out of date because I believe it was extended, but I believe just until yesterday because of some issues, some snafus issues with the voter registration link. But so, and I believe that has, correct me if I'm wrong, league leaders, I think that has expired. Maybe that was last night, but nonetheless, you can still request a vote by mail ballot to be mailed to you. That deadline is October 24th at 5 p.m. I recommend if you want to vote by mail, request it today. Early voting days begin October 24th through the 31st. Check with your county supervisor. I'm 90% sure this is Duval County dates. We usually have the full days. And the vote by mail ballot received, and you can vote in person on November 3rd by 7 p.m. So very important dates. We do want to, I think, relay the message that there are multiple ways to vote here in Duval County, and whatever your comfort level is, there's drop boxes, as well as putting your vote by mail into the mailbox and having your amazing postal worker deliver that. You can always call to confirm that it was received and your vote was counted. I did that personally in the primary to kind of test it. I easily went onto the website, put my name in, and it noted that I was counted, and I encouraged all my friends and families to do the same. And so if there's any question, or if you don't want to go that route, certainly the drop boxes, you can certainly go to one of the early voting sites during those early voting days and drop off your ballot. Or you could simply, if you're traditional and you feel safe to do so, then you can go on election day. So multiple ways you can make sure that your vote is turned in and counted. I kind of went over all of this, but I also did want to highlight Vote 411 is the league's amazing information about elections, and we send out candidate questionnaires. If we receive that back from the candidate, we really hope we get as many as possible, certainly from our local elections. You can always check that out at Vote 401, and I believe you can also check your voter registration. There's also a Spanish version, multiple ways to not only vote, but be an informed voter. So that's very, very important. And so, yeah, I think that's about it. Are there any last minute questions?
No questions on the amendments or the referendums, Angela. There was a question that somebody may be able to answer, or we might have to follow up with them. If a voter moves within a county between registration deadline and election day, can that voter vote at the old address, new address, or not at all?
That's a great question. I see Linnell nodding her head.
Yeah, so this is Linnell. If they move within the same county, they can go to any early voting site and still cast their vote, or drop off their vote by mail at any early voting site, secure drop box or at the supervisor of elections office. But if they wait till election day and their polling station has changed, that might be an issue.
Great. That is all of the questions, I think, from the chat.
Am I up?
You're up.
Okay, so first off, I just want to thank Deb Miller for keeping us technically relevant during the pandemic and making sure that we continue to be able to communicate with our members and get information out to voters. Linda, I'd like to thank you for putting our local program together. That's been a good body of work for the last 3 months, so I thank you very much for that. And Angela, thank you for covering our amendments and the referendum so that we can go out and we can cast an informed vote. As Angela said, make sure you have a plan, whether it's early voting in person or using the drop boxes, and make sure you track your ballot, as she mentioned. I do want to say this: if you're going to vote in person, whether it's on election day or during early voting, really have a plan for that also. We do recommend you wear a mask, you take your own pen, use hand sanitizer, and just practice social distancing while you're there. But especially if you're going to vote on election day, I'd also ask that you take a little bit of patience with you, just in case it is crowded. And if you're in line before the poll closes at 7, please make sure that you stay there so that you can cast your vote. A couple of good things that we have coming up, a lot of work's been going on in the background, is we have a forum coming up for the Congressional District 5, which will be Al Lawson and Gary Adler. That is actually going to be on October 14th with WJCT. It'll be at 6 p.m. But you'll need to go to our website so that you can actually register for that event so you can view it. But we're also taking questions from the public between now and the 10th of October. So if you have any questions for the candidates, please make sure you get those submitted. I do want to do a shout out for an organization that actually Angela leads. It's called Solar United Neighbors. And they actually have a solar congress that's going on right now. And there are a lot of great events that you can get involved with, and you can learn a lot about solar energy. So their organization, you can find that information at solarunitedneighbors.org. So please check that out. And I also want to thank Angela for her work with the Duval County Resiliency Committee. She is actually listed as a subject matter expert with the subcommittee. So I thank you for your work on that, Angela, and representing the league and keeping us in the know. There are a lot of things going on in the background. You may see emails coming from different board members or committee chairs, but I want to make sure that you know that the league continues to work even during the time of this pandemic. We've been sending out postcards to different registered voters or folks who attempted to register and maybe didn't complete the process. There have been texting, phone calls to different voters. There's been some email blasts that have gone out to our NPAs. But again, working on some forums, which we can always use help with. But also going into this next year, I'd like for people to consider serving on committees. Our healthcare committee is going to be very busy in 2021. A lot of initiatives coming up, a lot of legislation coming up, and we'll definitely need league members to support those events. But also we're still in need of an education committee chair and people to support that. The half-cent sales tax, if it passes, which we hope it will, is going to address some of the physical needs of our facilities, but there's a lot of legislation going on in the background regarding education, and we're going to need league members to support that as well. We're going to be thinking about doing some study and actions here locally, and we'll have some training coming up for that, if not before the new year, immediately afterwards, so that we can take a look at some of the things that we see could use some improvement here in the 4 counties that we're responsible for. So please keep an eye out for that in your newsletter or an email. But we'd also like to have committee members, league members who are willing to listen in on the Zoom meetings, the commissioner meetings, subcommittee meetings, as well as city council meetings, so that you can let us know if there are things going on where the league should be engaged, or we might need to have a voice in what's going on in our local communities. We're also going to have an opportunity, not just the league, but anybody in the Duval County area is going to have an opportunity to volunteer to give rides to voters in need of transportation to the polls. And that will be coming up with the First Coast Leadership Foundation. So if that's something that interests you or anything that I've mentioned so far, please make sure that you reach out to us via our league email. So that's LWVJFC@gmail.com. The league only works when the members do the work of the league. So we appreciate any support that you might be able to offer us. And I just want to say thank you again for joining us today. We know that there are many ways that you could spend the middle of your day on a Wednesday, so we're thankful that you chose to spend it with us.